Burned finger bones glitter in the ash like pearls, ice in my veins. The archivist, what was her name?
Welcome, patrons. We're doing another D4 Day request, this time obviously being Vivienne, asked for by Rosethorn. So thank you, Rosethorns. I gotta say that she's probably one of, the most forgotten about characters in the whole series, minus the entire Awakening cast, but, you know. But that's mostly because she doesn't really interact with the plot of Inquisition much, and if you don't actively pay attention to her, her story will slip right under your nose. So let's shed a little light on Madame de Fer. Childhood. So we don't know too much about Vivienne's childhood, given that she holds her cards to her chest pretty tightly, to say the least. But from the little we do know, her parents are both Ravani merchants from Darsmud, and that she was born in Wycombe herself. At some young age, she was taken to the Oswa Circle, and per her own words to Cassandra, she was young enough to actually not remember her family. And here I would actually like to pause her history for a quick background lesson. There are a dozen reasons why she could have ended up in the Ostwick Circle, but at face value, having a child from Ravani parents in a non-Ravani circle makes me raise, one hell of an eyebrow. See, Ravani's culture pre-Chantry was one where they were led by female mages, called seers. These seers were highly revered in their society, so having a daughter with magical talent was a great honor to a family. After the Chantry came, its views on magic were too extreme for most of the nation, so it was actually largely ignored, except for the capital of Darsmud. Maybe that plays into it because they're from Darsmud, I don't know. However, even in the capital, the circle there is nothing like the circles we've seen in other parts of the game. Women are still trained to be seers despite Chantry concerns, and family members of mages were allowed to live in a settlement within the circle. So with all that in mind, and as a parent myself, I have no idea why anyone who grew up with Ravani beliefs and a claim to put your child in the Darsmud Circle would have a kid wind up in Ostwick, which was way more traditional. I would have moved the earth and the stars to smuggle my daughter back to Ravane and enroll her there so I could stay with her, but Vivienne's parents didn't do that. Again, there are 1,000 possible reasons why this could be. They could have died. They could have just not wanted the child and didn't care. Maybe they thought she had better options living in Ostwick. I'm not sure. But at face value, I'm suspicious that Vivienne's parents were kind of maybe not the best. Now, the only possible clue we have about her past before the circle is a vague comment from Cole, which isn't technically confirmed to be about Vivienne. The wiki believes that this is a reference to Vivienne's relationship with Duke Bastien, and while possible, I don't believe the walls of Ostwick Circle were technically unsafe, and at the very least, they didn't let their people starve. So I've personally viewed this to be about her first moments in the circle. Perhaps her parents were poor merchants and tried but were unable to move her back to Ravane. Perhaps she and her family were always on the brink of starvation, and the best way she could get out of poverty was giving up their daughter to the Chantry. But with the nature of Cole's comments, hunger could also be a metaphor for something else, like knowledge or power. So at this point, Vivienne's past is whatever you want to think. Although I'm kind of partial to the idea that her parents were unable to provide for her, so gave her to the circle as a last chance option. It ended up working out, and that's why she's so protective of it. I can't really prove this story, but it just makes the most sense in my head. Now, you could also get on the road where her parents actually did not want her, but the circle did, and that's why she's so protective of the circle. Either way, it's your call. Anyway, let's jump back to Ostwick. Vivienne became one of the youngest full-fledged mages in the history of the entire circle, meaning that she took her harrowing and passed at a very young age, which we actually get a banter between her and Cole about that moment.
Everything bright, roar of anger as the demon rears. No, I will not fall. No one will control me ever again. Flash of white as the world comes back, shaking, hollow, harrowed but smiling at Templars to show them I'm me.
There is a small question on the control line that Cole speaks of, but at the moment we aren't sure who he's talking about. While possible that it's her parents, if she's truthful about not remembering them, it's more likely it was a friend or mentor in the circle. It was probably around this time that she met Lydia, who she calls a dear friend. While there is basically nothing known about this relationship, later on in Inquisition, she will ask a human mage inquisitor, because they're from Ostwick Circle, if they knew a Lydia. And the inquisitor can give a variety of answers, like she was like a mother to me, or fuck that bitch, or a bunch of stuff. Apparently, she was killed by one of her own students during the Mage Uprising, a fact that Vivienne looks greatly upset about. At 19, she was then transferred to the Montesimard Circle in Orlais. She was an exceptional scholar and showed promise in the Grand Game, the fancy schmancy word for Elysian politics. And a move that shocked the Circle, she decided to not join any of the Circle fraternities when she became an Enchanter. Now, just to elaborate on that a bit, Enchanters are mages that take on apprentices that study under them. These apprentices are usually children within the Circle and sort of act like one of those big brother, big sister programs in school, mixed with like a little tutoring. So only when you become an Enchanter can you join one of the fraternities within the Circle, which is basically when you can publicly announce your political affiliation. Bastien. At 916 Dragon, the mages of the Montemard Circle were invited to attend the Imperial Wintersend Ball to not only entertain the court, but to enjoy themselves as well. Now, as a quick aside, as the name would suggest, Wintersend is the Thedas holiday that welcomes the end of winter and, in tradition, often becomes the day to arrange marriages and holds battle contests. So it's kind of like fantasy Easter and Valentine's Day mixed with like a little bit of the Super Bowl. So it's sort of romantic holiday. I don't know. But here we need to talk about Duke Bastien de Ghislaine. Bastien was known to be a troublemaker in his youth, and per the world of Thedas, he dabbled in treason in the name of justice for the common folk, or perhaps for his own amusement. He lived a life similar to that of a bard. He famously trained under the Black Fox, which is actually a huge deal. That's like saying you trained under Robin Hood. But his elder sister died of the Blue Death in 896 Blessed, and so he took on her role in the court. What is the Blue Death, you ask? But I actually can't find a mention of that anywhere other than this one page in World of Thedas. Hey, open call, what the fuck's the Blue Death? I don't know. Anyway, what was her role in court? That much I can answer. As the de Ghislaine family is one of the oldest and most powerful in Orlais, it's no wonder that his place was as a part of the Council of Heralds, a group of 7 members that decide all disputes involving titles, including the Emperor to Orlais. To be on this council is to be one of the most important members of Orlesian society, and Duke Bastien led the council. Anyway, on this fine evening, Vivienne caught the attention of Duke Bastien, who completely fell head over heels for her. He danced only with her the entire night, slighting a number of very important noblewomen in the process, including the Dowager. And only a few days later, he visited her in Montesimard, accompanied by a small army of florists bearing armloads of peonies. His gift is said to have filled an entire floor of the circle and inspired at least 2 alchemists to divert their research into extracting fragrances instead. He began to invite her over to balls he held in his home, and by the start of the summer, which that means it's only around 3 months after they met, he had a suite of runes just for her, and she conducted her circle business by mail. So let's also take a quick tangent about marriage in Orlais, as I'm sure many of you are wondering why he never married Vivienne. In Orlais, at least for nobility, marriage isn't so much about love, but for solidifying contracts and land ownership. It's incredibly common to have a spouse that made a good political move and then a lover who you actually fell in love with. So the reason he never married Vivienne was because he was already married, and likely his 2 kids were already born before they met. Vivienne tells the Inquisitor that her and his wife Nicoline actually got along amazingly well and were good friends, and she seems to have a good relationship with his children. Well, at least his son. We'll get to his daughter in a bit. Moving on with the story, after Bastien and Vivienne started hooking up, the rest of the nobility saw this as a serious scandal. Not because of his marital status or the color of her skin, but because she was a mage. Many thought that a man of Bastien's rank shouldn't be involved with mages at all. Others thought that Vivienne must have used blood magic to enrapture him so completely and suddenly, which, moving in 3 months, that is kind of quick. But, So wave after wave attempted to have both of them assassinated, either for the shame of sleeping with a mage or the threat of blood magic or literally anything else because this is Orlais. But Bastien was a master of the game and was able to thwart anything thrown at him and retaliate in kind. Now, that's not to say Vivienne didn't do her own share of thwarting. Along with the nobles, Vivienne had also upset a number of mages, thinking that she was using this relationship to become first enchanter, which might have been true and we will discuss later, but she was just as skilled in the game. Using her skills, those who came to her either ended up working for her instead or were frozen solid and sent back to their employer. Now, before we move on, let's jump back to that daughter I mentioned a moment earlier. This is only really tangentially related, but I feel like it's just good to know for Wicked Eyes Wicked Hearts quest to give it some context, and it's actually slightly mentioned when you meet Vivienne, but it just kind of goes over your head because it's at the beginning of the game and there's just so much going on. But Bastienne's daughter, Calienne, was married to Duke Gaspard de Chalons. I'm really going to water down the story for the sake of time, but in short, why don't we see her in game? Well, in 920 Dragon, when the seat of the Emperor was being fought over for the first time by Celine and Gaspard, Caliennes arranged for the assassination of Celine's mother. After her death, Celine's father and the good old Duke Prosper, Celine's sort of uncle, it was like her mom's cousin, whatever, killed Calienne. Although she was able to poison Celine's father before her death, and then he died. So all this was going on while Vivienne was lover to Bastienne. So in short, Vivienne's sort of stepdaughter, who was probably the same age or older than her, was killed by the parents of her future boss, and somehow she had no approval changes for the ending of Wicked Eyes Wicked Hearts. She truly gives no fucks at who wins and loses at the game. Madame de Fer. The assassinations and general uproar about Bastienne and Vivienne would go on until Empress Celine came into power at 920 Dragon. Celine is a bit of a geek for the magical and strange, so she asked for the most skilled mage to be court enchanter. Now, at the time, the role of court enchanter was regarded as little more than a glorified court jester. Vivienne's name had been given by the Empress, and the Empress had wanted Vivienne for the job in only one meeting, so it was a surprise when ambitious Vivienne took the job. Now, Orlais has rules on who can hold political power. One of these is that mages cannot hold office. But despite that ruling, Vivienne was able to manipulate the purpose she had in court to be more of an advisor role on the magical world in the Circle. Suddenly, every Circle fraternity wanted her to join so that they could be close to the Empress. However, she never officially joined any of them. The assassination attempts also stopped, as few nobles wanted to earn the ire of the new Empress. It's during these years that she earned the nickname Madame de Fer, or Lady of Iron, a name that she seems to be quite fond of as she uses de Fer instead of a last name in the letter to the Inquisitor. She was also given the nickname Jewel of the High Court of Orlais in reference to her impeccable fashion, which I don't think has been used as much as Madame de Fer in the series, but that's another one. She was also voted to become the first enchanter of Montesimard and was apparently young enough to cause scandal. While we don't know her exact age and when she was elected, given that she's in her 40s at the start of Inquisition and was at least still the first enchanter during the events of Masked Empire, which happened in 940, which is a year before Inquisition, she has been first enchanter for at least a year and probably more when we meet her. I wouldn't find it surprising if she was first enchanter in her mid-30s. About 17 years after her appointment of court enchanter to Empress Celine, in 937 Dragon, a strange mage named Morrigan started to arrive in court. While Vivienne was still the court enchanter, Morrigan was also hired to be Celine's occult advisor. Morrigan was an open apostate, now able to avoid Templars due to her position with the Empress, and was basically a rival to Vivienne. Per Cole,
Uncultured barbarian witch.
I beg your pardon, demon.
Jaws ache, dress stiff, binding, years of work, favours fought, deals dealt, and the witch usurped my position.
Remove yourself from my head.
You're angry at Morrigan. She took what you had without working.
3 years after Morrigan joins the court, the events of the White Spire take place and the mages break away from the Chantry. Despite never taking a side in the fraternities, her beliefs in the dangers of magic and the place of the Circle made her the obvious leader for the mages who were still loyal to the Chantry and did not want to rebel. Now, in the fandom, Vivienne gets a lot of flack for this belief, but there is another side to the mage rebels and what we saw in the game.
Sour smell in the tower library, rotten meat and ashes, too quiet without the apprentices, something crunches underfoot. Burned finger bones glitter in the ash like pearls, ice in my veins. The archivist, what was her name?
Get out.
Why did they kill her? She was just like them.
They helped her, just like you did. Anyone who wouldn't fight for freedom was freed by fire and lightning. Stay out of my thoughts, demon. My memories are my own.
I'm not going to sit here and debate Vivienne's morals and privilege, but at the very least, she does have a point. Magic is dangerous. Dragon Age Inquisition. During their first time in Val Rayo, the Inquisitor will receive a note from Madame de Fer to join their party. This note, and Vivienne herself, is actually completely skippable, and you can play the entire game and not even notice she's gone. If not recruited, we aren't really sure what she's up to during the events of the game, but she makes a very small appearance in the ending of the Trespasser slides. The first time you meet Vivienne is actually a much more complex character moment than at face value. You enter her salon, which is held in Bastien's home, and are greeted with a chatty group of nobles. As you talk, a man starts to insult you and attempts to fight you, but he is frozen solid by Vivienne, who makes a grand entrance. She gives you the choice on what to do with him. Either release him, kill him, or let Vivienne decide, which ends in public humiliation. In another banter with Cole, he reveals that the man who approached you during your meeting and insults you actually insulted Vivienne first.
Voices inside. Marquis Alphonse. I do hope Duke Bastien puts out the lights before he touches her, but then she must disappear in the dark. Gown tight between my fingers, cold all over, unacceptable. Wheels turn, strings pull. He hurt you. You left a letter, let out a lie so he would do something foolish against the Inquisition. A trap.
Inquisitor, as your demon lacks manners, perhaps you could get Solus to train it.
So, in short, the moment where he insults you and Vivienne steps in to defend your honor had been planned for a while before the Inquisitor even stepped foot in the door. She used this dude who had insulted her as bait to gain your trust and perhaps even approval. Even if you don't like Vivienne, you have to admit that's an impressive character entrance, even though this might be the best moment she has in the game. You can either accept or deny her request to join the Inquisition. If you deny, she leaves and you can't recruit her. If you accept, she joins the Inquisition. She is also one of the few companions that once recruited, you can't actually get her to leave. No matter how much she hates you, she will stay and see it through. No matter your approval, after the quest Wicked Eyes, Wicked Hearts, Vivienne will ask the Inquisitor a favor. She is brewing a potion and needs the heart of a snowy wyvern, saying that a member of the Council of Heralds needs it, but won't say exactly why. Poking around her Aryan Skyhold, you can find a book titled Vivienne's Alchemy Notes, which clues the player into the fact that she is trying to brew an age regression potion. That mixed with the fact that the quest is titled Bring Me the Heart of Snow White, which is a reference to the fairy tale in which a vain, evil queen calls for the heart of the Princess Snow White so that she may eat it for immortality. Really, everything is leading the player to assume this potion is for herself and that she has lied to you. Now from here, the Inquisitor has two options. Give her the heart of a snowy wyvern, or give her the heart of a normal one, as she will not be able to tell the difference. After giving her either, she asks you to come with her, and you find yourself in Duke Bastien's bedchamber. Turns out he is gravely ill and dying, unable to do anything. Vivienne then gently gives him the concoction, and she had been honest with you. The potion was indeed for a member of the Council of Heralds, which is, it's actually kind of obvious in the timeline of things that I'm giving here, but for the player, it's probably the first time you're really seeing and thinking about Bastien, so before you actually had no idea how old he was. If you give her a normal heart, he moans a bit before dying. Back at Skyhold, Vivienne has figured out the Inquisitor has lied and politely insults them before sending them away. If you give her the heart she asked for, he calls to her and gives her a final moment of comfort, saying that everything is going to be alright. He then dies peacefully. Back at Skyhold, she has her first real emotionally open moment with the Inquisitor, mourning her lover and talking about their relationship. If you have high approval with Vivienne, she will introduce you to her lover's sister and son, who will inherit the seat on the Council of Heralds. And she will also give you a ring that she commissioned for you and says that it was once a custom for circles to enchant items for their friends and allies. She will also at one point recommend you her tailor so that you can have a good outfit to look formidable in. And if you have low approval, she rearranges the furniture in Skyhold behind your back and then will basically always make sure to throw you under the bus verbally when she has the chance, which, to be honest, hasn't actually stopped her before this moment, but now she's really going hard on you. And, that's kind of about it as far as Vivienne's place in the game goes pre-endgame. Vivienne is easily the companion with the least amount of content, and probably that's the main reason why people tend to forget her, which is ironic given her fear in the nightmare. Her most interesting and heartfelt aspects are really only available if you read codex entries in the World of Thedas books, so that mixed with her having a cold edge leads her to be a pretty disliked character. Divine. So at one point in the game, Vivienne will talk to the Inquisitor about who the next Divine will be, giving the most unsubtle hint that she wants to be Divine. Now, she's actually one of the hardest Divines to get, as you basically either need to ally with the Templars or take the mages prisoner, be a mage yourself, and she also has less options to actually gain points to be Divine, plus there's actually a common bug where Liliana gains points no matter what. If you do manage to do it, or cheat it like I do all the time, she becomes Divine Victoria. Now, she is the first mage to ever hold the position, and for a good reason, as the Chantry is strongly against mages holding power per the words of Andraste, and their stance on magic is one of the reasons why the Tevinter Chantry split off from the main Chantry. Because of her being a mage, there is a huge uproar in Thedas, with 3 revolts against her. Each brings an immediate and vicious response from Vivienne, and everything was chaos for months, but she is able to calm it. She reinstated the Circle of Magi and the Templars, who are firmly leashed to her hand, whereas before, the Seekers were in between the Divine and the Templars. However, despite the Circle returning, mages are given more freedom and responsibility in the Circles, and many of them rise to higher power than ever before. However, there is always worry that her many critics will fracture the Chantry. Trespasser. 2 years after the game ends, Vivienne meets you at the Exalted Council to decide the fate of the Inquisition, either as a friend or as the Divine. If you are friends with her, she treats you to a spa day, while Sarah manages to cause mischief. Now, this is probably her second best scene in the game, as she is one of the only few handful of characters to really ask how the Inquisitor is doing, and even acknowledges if the Inquisitor has been flirting with Scout Harding, or even give comfort to a Lavellan who has romanced Solus. If nothing else, the scene added cheesewheel eyes to the lore, and I'm just glad for it. Now, she doesn't actually have much to say for the entire DLC, but she, in my opinion, has probably the most confusing state of any companion post-game, but in the end, the kind of where that confusion is just a lot of noise and unnecessary detail to kind of all the same ending. There are, frankly, so many tiny details to keep track of that probably don't matter, so I'm not going to bore you with them, but in the end, no matter what you do, a version of the Circle comes back, along with a secular version called the College of Enchanters. Vivienne will always lead the Circle as its Grand Enchanter, except if she's Divine. Now, the state of each organization depends on your choices. Some make the Circle weaker but strengthen the College, some strengthen the Circle but weaken the College, and others just kind of make them in an uneasy peace. Some are warring, it kind of depends. Now, if Vivienne is Divine, the Exalted Council still exists and advises her. With Cassandra sitting on the council, she will actually later leave, believing that Vivienne is perverting the Chant of Light to suit her whims. And here we get just like the tiniest little view into what happened to Vivienne if you didn't recruit her. She still makes it to the Circle, likely as Grand Enchanter, although not confirmed, and the Circle still is uneasy with the College of Enchanters. So, okay, I would like to make some closing remarks on Vivienne. It's easy to throw her into a box of the cold-hearted bitch and hate her, that every show of affection and love is a calculated move for her own benefit, but I don't think that's who she really is. While she can be cold, and is definitely a bitch and knows it, she does deeply care about things. I think if you have high approval, she does care about the Inquisitor, and her advising on how you look and pose yourself is her way of caring. In her world, which also happens to be the world you are now thrusted into as a leader, that's how one protects themselves, and she's trying to help you be safe. I think she really did love Bastien too. Despite having a really sort of gross age difference between them, I don't think she was with him all those years for the money and power. Now, did it help? Sure. But there was something between them, something we don't see, and Vivienne wouldn't want out anyway. You see cracks of it when she talks about him. He seemed to bring her anything she wanted without asking, and she probably felt loved and safe, and that's something she had desired for so long. And that, dear patrons, is all that we know of Vivienne. Do you still have lingering questions? Proof that I'm wrong? Comments about your own fan theory? Feel free to tweet me at @Gilderthon on Twitter or send a PM to user Gillinon on Reddit. The rest are all.